What's happening, everybody? John Hendrix here alongside Ross Jackson for Saints News Network, coming at you again from our secret lab or bat cave, whatever you want to call it. Not really. Our faux studios to talk Saints OTAs. Ross, how you doing today, man?
Oh man, I'm great. I'm excited. More and more football we get to see means the more and more, like the closer and closer the football season gets, if that makes sense. So I'm stoked and ready to go.
Yeah, and so yesterday was a little bit different, or yesterday as in Tuesday, for those who might be watching this in an alternate
Mhm.
timeline or universe or something like that. But yeah, it was a little bit different because it was a beautiful day. Weather wasn't too crazy, all things considered. Then we get this faux lightning delay or
Up out of
lightning in the
nowhere.
area. Yeah, it's like it detects within 10 miles or something. And so practice goes from being outdoors, which if you've never seen practice or you don't know practice, they have two separate fields so you
Mhm.
can spread everybody out, but then you have to condense everything and go inside, which is a lot more, I don't know, close quarters, I guess, if you will,
Yeah.
but they still got it done. But, I guess just to start and open up, toss it up for you. What were some of your general impressions from Tuesday's OTAs?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest thing. Well, I'll start with the inside transition. The most disappointing thing is that we finally got to see Lou Headley kick the Thunder from down under, and the Thunder was very limited because he kept hitting the ceiling of the indoor facility, and so we didn't really get to see what he had. But I'm so excited to see the tattooed punter go out there and boom some during in the outdoor facility. But I think a couple of the big things that kind of hit. I know that we'll discuss. We'll discuss one here in a moment, but I'll jump to Alontae Taylor over on the defensive side. He took some snaps over on the in the slot, and he made it very clear as we spoke to him afterwards in the locker room that look, I'm still an outside corner. I'm not transitioning to the inside or anything like that, but he's learning the position, and I think that there's value in that because even if he cross trains successfully, and then never becomes a starting nickel corner, him as an outside perimeter guy that can play inside gives him the ability to be able to shadow different receivers, gives him the ability to be able to track different receivers, whether they're lined up inside or outside, to where if Alontae Taylor is pestering a big time receiver, the Saints can say, okay, stay on that guy and keep him out of this game, no matter where that guy lines up. So I do think that there's still some value there, just in terms of the gamesmanship of what that can create in a heavy man coverage defense like the New Orleans Saints. But it was great just to see sort of that swagger, that attitude coming from Alontae Taylor, and seeing that in the slot where that is so important.
Yeah, and look, it's something I've talked about for months that was kind of the plan that was going on. Something I
Mm-hmm.
think we picked up a little bit more steam at the combine, just that they wanted to try there. They do believe a lot in Bradley Roby there, but obviously he wasn't at practice. Neither was Marshon Lattimore or Paulson Adiobo. Again, OTAs are strictly voluntary. Please
Right.
don't make hot takes. And the only person that's actually really injured that we know of is Nick Saldivari, but he was there at the indoor facility getting some work in with some medicine
Yep.
balls. So even that's good news to see that he's around. When these guys aren't there, that's when we kind of wonder. Obviously, we weren't expecting like Michael Thomas, but Demario Davis
Right.
comes back, JT Gray's back. But you kind of touched on it with Taylor, man. He's just a fireball of energy,
Yeah.
and he's a guy that just loves to play. And it's one of those things where I remember last year when they drafted him, I was like, why? Like, just why, And you just saw him come do all these things in special teams. You saw him do all these things in reps, and he got game work and stuff. And suddenly now, this is a good problem to have for the Saints secondary, because I
Yep.
remember the days where you were down to Devontae Harris and
Corey
Ryan
White.
Dixon and stuff, Corey
Mm-hmm.
White. Like, come on, guys, you remember those days too. But just being able to have that much depth, and Mickey Loomis had said this on SiriusXM interview the other day, is
Mm-hmm.
they're banking on Michael Thomas and Marshon Lattimore to have those bounce back years. So good problem to have for the Saints secondary. Very interesting takeaway from the slot. What were some of your other impressions that you had?
Well, I'm actually going to kick this back over to you because there's an offensive guy that stood out big time
Mm.
that I know you were excited to talk about. I'm excited to talk about him too. Let's talk about the guy over on the offense that stood out today.
Yeah, let's talk about Rashid Shaheed. Stock up. That's what I
Yeah,
put on
big
there.
time.
And look, he was great the first week. Like, I just see the crisp route running. I see
Hmm.
the cuts. I see the hands. I see all those elements that make him very exciting. And then yesterday, just stealing the show. I mean, look, we didn't see a lot of team, but we saw maybe 4 snaps as we're trying to exit the building, kind of, or for DA's interview. But even in 7-on-7, he's working against
Yep.
Alontae Taylor in the slot. He's just running a crossing route. Derek Carr throws him the ball. He just sticks out one hand and just makes it look effortless, like it was just the stuff of icons. It reminded me of what Jarvis Landry did last year just in training camp. You remember he made those one-handed catches, just so effortless. So that was like the first play. And then the second one was in team where he gets behind the defense, working against Isaac Yiadom and JT Gray. But it's just the thing is his speed was on display, gets behind the defense, makes a huge play, something he was notorious for last year. And I think that's a missing element that the Saints have had, and they just haven't had the luxury for the past couple of seasons until he kind of came in the fold. But man, it's just so exciting. You could tell he's confident, and that's what Dennis Allen talked about after practice. It's just his confidence is breeding there, and Cody Burns has a lot to do with that, just playing around guys like Chris Olave. But man, what they're getting in Rashid Shaheed is pretty exciting. This is again a crowded wide receiver room. There's even the possibility of Hunter Renfrow, the DeAndre Hopkins stuff. I don't think that's a real possibility. Hunter Renfrow is probably more likely to happen than that. But man, what are your thoughts? Because you talked to Rashid a good bit after practice too.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about watching Rashid Shaheed is that he reminds me so much of the energy that Marquez Callaway was bringing to this team. He reminds me of the energy that Cam Newton used to bring to the Panthers, just smiling and having a blast while also being out there and like balling out the way that he is. It's awesome. And so I love seeing that from him. I think the thing that is so successful for him is his ability as he has continued to develop as a route runner. And the thing that helps make that so successful is that DBs have to buy the vertical push. They have to, because if they don't, they're toast. They're done. Like there's nothing you can do at that point. And so the key to any good route being run is almost always, there are some exceptions, but almost always how well you can sell, I'm going deep. And that means you as a defensive back, you have to keep up with me. I'm setting the tone. You have to commit and flip your hips. And once you flip your hips and I'm at the top of my route stem, I now can make my cut. And then that all of a sudden, when you're able to do things like that, that DB is always playing from behind. And you're seeing that more and more and more with Rashid Shaheed, understanding the leverage. I'm going to force you to flip your hips and commit because you know you have to be afraid of me deep. But I'm really running this in or this dig or this post or this comeback or whatever. And he's able to sell it as he pushes upfield. That is such a that is one of those things that sometimes you watch receivers take 5-6 years in the NFL to develop. Rashid Shaheed he played 10, 11 games last year. He's going into his second year loosely, and he's already doing things like this. And it's a testament to the guys that he's around. Chris Olave sells routes the same way. Michael Thomas sells routes the same way. Cody Burns pushes that and we watched some of the new drills that they incorporated last year where they started utilizing obstacles and all these other things like that all heads towards where it is that this team wants to head in terms of route runners. And you're seeing that continue to develop for Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the obstacles because I remember like one of the things they brought in is just, I don't know how to completely what the technical term is, but
it's red gate.
It's a stanchion with the gate on top and you have to get your head underneath it and then you catch the ball and stuff. Like those are things that when you see at practice and those things that we pick up on, like it's just the nuances of how they teach the game and you hope it translates into Sunday. But man, this is exciting. And again, talking about Loomis being on in SiriusXM, brought up Michael Thomas. Again, another guy that they're banking on being there, right? And he says that he's kind of going along in the process. And he says that, if you would talk to Mike right now, that he feels good about where he's at and they feel good about him being at training camp. So you're talking about, again, I think we've talked about it before, but, Thomas, Olave, and Shaheed, that's if they stay healthy. For Derek Carr, and then you had Foster Moreau, Juwan Johnson, Jamal Williams in the backfield, Alvin Kamara. This is a particular nightmare for opposing defenses. And that's what I love is that a lot of it centers around Derek Carr, but you get the protection, you get the run game going like we saw last year. Then you let Derek cook a little bit. I mean, this has a potential. I don't want to say it's top 5 offense, top 10 offense. I think they've got to prove themselves. But what do you think that potential is for this offense if they get all these guys healthy?
Yeah, if nothing else, they have everything they need to be able to take a massive step forward from what I'm going to say this very carefully. They have everything that they need to be able to take a massive step forward from where they expected to be last year. So I don't mean just where they were last year. You know what I mean? Because where they were last year was below where they expected. I think that this team has the ability and has everything it needs to exceed the expectations that it had for its offense last year. And a lot of that comes down to, as you mentioned, the skill position players that are there, but they also built out their depth on the offensive line, which allows you to be able to protect the quarterback. They have these massively versatile running backs, like, of course, like Alvin Kamara, but Benjamin, who is somebody that the Saints really, really love. He made a big time impression on them in that Week 7 Thursday night game against the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, he's somebody that isn't Alvin Kamara, but you don't have to change the playbook as much when Benjamin's in. Kendre Miller is going to develop as a pass catcher. Jamal Williams, I spoke with some folks around him about his workout over the course of the offseason, a piece that I put out over on Saints News a couple of months ago now, or I guess last month. Catching 1,000 passes a day, 4 days a week. I don't think I've caught 1,000 passes in my entire lifetime. And so, you just look at these guys and the way that they have continued to sort of develop that backfield. And then now you got Kirk Merritt joining that backfield, who is also a wide receiver. So, he's got the hands. The Saints are planning on expanding their third down package this week and going into next week. That means that this is a big time opportunity for these running backs to start to prove themselves as pass catchers. It could be a little bit of separation season for guys like Ellis Merriweather and SaRodorick Thompson, the undrafted free agent running backs that came in as well.
Yeah, so and you segue perfectly. So no AK there. Kendre Miller was there. So was Benjamin, but they're not participating, right? So it gives a chance for Kirk Merritt to get more reps. Obviously, Jamal Williams go in, SaRodorick Thompson, Mayweather. You talked to running back coach Joel Thomas after practice too, pretty much exclusive type of interview. What are some of the things that maybe stood out? Because Joel Thomas has been around for this team for a long time. He's one of those like a Ronald Curry or some of those coaches that just get a lot of praise, or a Michael Hodges, but don't really take the forefront of like, they're not front and center like, DA was, or Chris Richard, or maybe Ryan Nielsen. So share some of the things that y'all two discussed yesterday.
Yeah, JT's a blast to talk to, and he always comes with so much information. I asked him to kind of give me a rundown. Really, what I asked him to do was just to give me some thoughts on kind of where the status of the running back room is right now. And he literally went through and listed every single running back and gave his thoughts around each and every one. So how much he's in tune with that running back room. In the midst of doing that, he's calling back to, well, look at guys like Mark Ingram back in the day, and look at guys like Latavius Murray. And so he's pulling back from sort of the historical understanding of the team. So just has this really good holistic understanding of what it is that the Saints running back room wants to be. One of the things that stood out to me is that I spent a lot of time with him talking about Kendre Miller. And one of the things that he mentioned was, look, when Latavius Murray showed up in New Orleans, nobody knew he could catch passes. Nobody thought of him as a pass catcher, right? But the Saints developed him into that. You remember there was a couple, I think it was a Chiefs game, and then there was another one in a playoff game to where he stood up, Latavius Murray stood up a pass rusher, a free rusher off the edge, got that guy isolated or neutralized, and then broke away from that to catch a pass from Drew Brees and then pick up some big
Chicago Bears game. It was against the Bears. I remember that.
Yeah. And so he had a couple of those throughout his time. And that's exactly what you're going to be expecting to see from guys like Jamal Williams, as well as Kendre Miller. And what I mean by expecting to see that, I think what I mean is the versatility, all the different ways you contribute as a pass blocker, as a pass catcher, but also as a runner. So I think that was a big one. Kirk Merritt has been spending his entire offseason as well as OTAs in the running back room. This was an approach that started early last season, but then he eventually early last training camp, and then he eventually returned back to the wide receiver room. This is looking a little bit more like a potential position change for Kirk Merritt. The Alontae Taylor moving into the nickel is a little bit of like cross training here, get to know this, have a better holistic understanding of your entire defense, all that. But this Kirk Merritt one feels a little bit more like, okay, this might be a permanent shift for him if he makes the roster or the practice squad, which would be huge because that's one spot, much like the Saints take advantage of their defensive versatility. That's one roster spot that can contribute in two different places, a la Ty Montgomery in the past. And so I think that there's a lot of different molds that are built around this team that make a ton of sense. Joel Thomas is a fantastic leader for this running back room, has a very good understanding of how everyone can contribute, but is expecting some of these players to start to separate themselves here over the course of the next week or so.
Yeah, and look, again, practice is still ongoing. DA talking about practice yesterday, just kind of saying that it showed for a team that was off for 4 days, make the corrections, do it. Before we get out of here today, just your thoughts on the team bringing in John Gruden. One of those things where I know it causes some controversy, right? But they've done this before. They brought in guys like Mike March to help with Alvin Kamara's usage, and that was under Sean Payton, mind you, too. But just what's the risk reward? Like, what is your kind of take on that?
Yeah, I think that the risk is that you get backlash, and you're going to get backlash from the fan base. You could potentially get backlash from within the organization, but usually backlash within the organization is quickly neutralized or never really comes to fruition. This is a situation in which John Gruden came out and was visiting with the Saints for a matter of days. I don't know the exact timeline, but a matter of days. And it's kind of I think T-Bob Abear referred to it as a soft reintroduction of John Gruden to the NFL. So maybe they get to learn a little bit about, okay, maybe there's a role here, there, or elsewhere. But I don't know that that's what the New Orleans Saints goal is here with this. They wanted to bring him in to help with the transition into the offense for Derek Carr in 3 different key factors. The first factor is in reinstalling some of the things that they have been doing in the recent past that will complement Derek Carr's game. The second bit is reinstalling some things in the distant past that can complement Derek Carr's game a little bit, especially understanding his ability to set things up at the line of scrimmage, getting back to an earlier form of the Drew Breesian version of the Sean Payton offense. And then the third piece, which is where I think John Gruden is most impactful, or was most impactful on that visit, is bringing things from the Las Vegas Raiders and bringing things into where Derek Carr is already comfortable and adding them into this offense. You can't bring Tom Condon over. He's busy. You can't bring Sean Payton in. He's busy. So you got to go with the guy that has the institutional knowledge and that can do it. And that's John Gruden. My biggest factor in all of this is the risk of the backlash enough for a reward that no one is going to know about a year from now? Like, I just don't feel like we're going to look back a year from now. If the Saints offense is successful, we're going to give that credit to Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael and the offensive coaches and Derek Carr and the wide receivers and those who produced and all that. We're not going to look back at it and go, man, I sure am glad that they brought in John Gruden. You know what I mean? For a week. Like, I just don't think that's going to be the case. So does the risk versus reward balance out? That's what will remain to see. But so far the risk has been merely backlash, which, as we know, the way that the news cycle works, it'll blow over in a week or two.
Sure. Yeah. And like I said, if they've done it with Mike Martz, if they brought in like Mike Holmgren or Steve Mariucci, somebody in that
Tom
West Coast
Coughlin
offense style,
well,
nobody, would probably care, right? But it's just one of those things, like you said, it'll probably blow over. But just an interesting thing, and if it helps Derek and he sets the world on fire, then nobody's really going to remember that time that John Gruden came in, right, and stuff.
Right.
But, at any rate, good practice to watch yesterday, even though it just had to move indoors and stuff. What fans can really just realize is that we get one every week so far, and we got one more to look at for OTAs, mandatory mini camps, June 13th through 15th. Just got an announcement yesterday that the Texans and Saints are going to have joint practices in New Orleans. They're still working on kind of the logistics there, but it's definitely looks like it's going to happen. So interesting I can't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, a team doing 2 joint practices.
I've never seen it.
Like, and they're flip flopping. So like Houston's coming off of hosting Miami, and then they're going to go to New Orleans, and then New Orleans is with the Chargers the week before, and they're going to host the Texans. That's pretty crazy, but I think it's going to be a good thing to have it. I think there was tons of benefits seeing what they did against Green Bay last year, even though you don't really see it too much in the season. But your thoughts quickly before we get out of here on the competition, just having those joint practices and the extra one.
Yeah, I just think you're in a situation here where you have a lot of new on your roster. And so the more opportunity that you get those players, instead of lining up across from one another, lining up across from people that they're unfamiliar with, it takes you from new and unfamiliar into building chemistry, understanding how to attack, and then starting to build some of the things that you're not accustomed to. So I do think that that's really important. I love the fact that the Saints are one of these teams that's going to do this twice in a season, because I do think that there's a lot of value. And when we went to Green Bay with them last year, John, you remember a lot of the players loved the joint practices too. Like they really, really enjoyed the benefit of it. Now they get 2 whole weeks of it, which, it could be like a little goes a long way with just one, but I imagine that 2 will have just as much benefit, if not more.
Over under how many times we have Trevor Penning get into a scuffle after the whistle with somebody?
I think we would have to set the over under at like 2.5, right? Which doesn't
feel
feel like a lot, but 2.5 over the course of 2 weeks. If it was Trey Hendrickson, I'd probably put it at like 4.5. But at 2, but I would set it at 2.5 for Trevor Penning. And you know what? I'm going to take the under too. I'm going to take the under.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that. I feel like that would be adequate. I mean, he's coming in here. Obviously, he's looking good. One of the things I pointed out in my observation was the fact that he's he's there. He's not participating in drills, but he's also mimicking going through the motion. So it may not be like full step, full contact, but he's there. He looks good. He actually looks, to me, it looks a little bit leaner in some aspects. I don't know if that's true, but you know, I remember the last time he had the foot injury, he said his diet completely changed. So really interested to see what that happens with Trevor Penning, speaking of one of the many. And then I also saw Jari Evans and Cesar Ruiz chumming it up a good bit while they're doing offensive line. So look, the hopes is they take a major step forward, but always tons of things to see. Even if you're like, oh, I don't want to see special teams work, there's always something going on. Ross is one of the best at looking at it. I love to put those things together. It's just the time of year when we get those that it's just fun to watch football and then give all of our stuff away to everybody else to say, here's what we saw at practice.
Yeah, it's always a blast, man. And it's always a pleasure to be able to do that, do all that with you. You know, I loves me some special teams, love football all together. And I think that's what makes it so that we really love what we're doing here, is that we just love the game of football, and so grateful we get to spend it with everybody.
Absolutely. For Ross Jackson, I'm John Hendrix signing off. Don't forget to check out saints.media or si.com/NFL/Saints for all the latest and greatest. Tons of stuff from OTAs, tons more coming. And then obviously follow us on all our social channels at Saints News on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Appreciate you guys as always. Thanks.